given the trust, but they also wanted to prove that the trust was justified. And they rose to the occasion. They performed better. They brought out the best in them. They returned the trust, and they got better results. So having some awareness of the generations and what interests them. Most everyone wants to be trusted, but there's some folks in particular that really want to have a chance to be given that trust. And sometimes they think that they need to be given it, not just earn it, and then they'll show you that they deserve it when they get it. But it affects how we lead, how we manage in a whole variety of ways.
Well, you guys are doing something, because I'm getting jammed. I just threw my questions out.
Scott, before you go to that, since these guys brought up social media, and since we're dealing with trust, I think it's a poignant time to say that comes with a bit of sophistication. When it comes to professional image, one of the 6 elements of professionalism in my new book, by the way, I hate it when people are on stage and push their new book, but there's 100 of them out there for sale. But my favorite chapter in writing that book was a chapter called Fired on Facebook. And we need to let people know, we need to let that 8-year-old and 10-year-old and 12-year-old and 22-year-old know that people are watching, people are reading. And the classic example, the one that's kind of now become the iconic representation of having a little sophistication of what you put online, is a lady, and I won't tell you where she's from or what company or anything, but she came home from work, got on Facebook around 6 o'clock, which leads me to believe she probably stopped for 1 or 2 drinks with her friends on the way home. Got on and said, "My boss is such a pervy wanker. All he does is make me do the SHIT jobs. I hate it. I hate my job." And 45 minutes later, the boss responded, "Maybe you forgot 2 things, that you had friended me on Facebook a couple of months ago, and that you have 3 weeks left in your probationary status. Don't bother to come in. I'll stick your termination notice in the post, and yes, I am serious." Very, very interesting. I don't know about the rest of you out there, but if I have an employment prospect candidate in my hands, I am checking every social media site I possibly can before I bring them into interviews. So a little bit of sophistication with how we use that social media, I think, is important.
I've got to throw this one at you guys, because and whoever it is that came up with this, I'm going to steal it, just so you know, for my next book, because I love this. Age is mandatory, maturity is optional. I'm sure some other people have said, who put that question out there? Anybody going to take? There you go. I love that. So guys, age is mandatory, maturity is optional. What do you do with that?
Well, you don't touch it, so I'll give it to Tony.
Yeah, I'll take it first, and I'll be very brief, and I will bring it back to you. Which one are you, both or mature? I don't have my glasses on. I'm going to pass comment. Well, I think a little example here is probably a good thing. I think that stereotypes of age, much like Mr. Case said a few minutes ago, need to be reevaluated. I think there are a lot of folks in the boomer generation, or maybe even traditionalists, that are still, well, after all, we're children of the 60s, right? We still have a little bit of that sex, rock and roll kind of thing. And so that's going to be part, who you are is where you were when, right? And maybe that's part of us that lives on forever. I have a 24-year-old person we hired as a technical writer. She came in, and 4 days after she came in, we have a mandatory HR thing where they come through and we say, "How was your recruiting, selection, and hiring process? How did it go?" And I see it at 10:15 on my schedule. I'm going, don't really have to do this. I'm not a very good CEO. I got to do it. Okay, so she comes in. I said, "How was your recruiting?" Expecting her to say, "Oh, it was fine, sir. I love my job." She goes, "Well, I have a couple of things here." And she pulls out her list and she goes, "Well, the employee benefits weren't laid out correctly in your handbook." She goes, "The fact of the matter, I had to wait 15 minutes longer than I was scheduled to for my initial interview, and time is money." And she makes about 4 or 5 lists of things, and I said, "Well, is there anything else?" And she goes, "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, there is." And just like you said, very respectful, very efficient, and in so doing, of course, my response was what? Defensive, right? "No, I'm sure that it's in the employee handbook," right? "Oh no, I've got it here." She brings it out, shows me everything. And I thanked her. We went and we did the work to fix that. We made it public that, hey, here's somebody who's spotting improvement. opportunities in our company, and she became a cult hero overnight, 4 days into the company. To me, that's trust building, it's informal leadership, and I think that it's the kind of thing that we as baby boomers and traditionalists need to be able to fall in behind. Where you're at on the vertical organizational chart does not map, I think, to the reality of some of this cross-generational stuff. And it just seems like now, when there's an issue of a matrix or compliance or something like that, I naturally fall in behind this young lady. So I'll
Go ahead.
leave it at that.
Yeah, and one of the things, it's a great question, because I think that the other aspect of it in terms of age and maturity is there is no correlation. Okay, with all due respect, I don't think this scientifically has ever proven it, and sometimes people think with age there's wisdom, and some of the dumber people I know are the oldest.
I'm waiting.
But anybody here, quick show of hands, anybody here have a 2-year-old daughter or granddaughter? Okay, based on demographics, they can live to 100. All right, based on demographics, a child 2 years old, a boy, can live till 89. Now, I can remember telling my daughter, who has a 10 and 8-year-old daughters, that their children can live until 100, and she said, marry rich girls, we're in it for the long haul. Okay, so maybe maturity and wisdom, there is a correlation.
Well, along these lines, and this is, and again, I sound like I'm with a bunch of psychologists trying to work out my family problems, but no, one of the things that just culture, and I know that Tony, you've spent a lot of time in that area, and the issues of just culture is everybody embraces it until it happens to them. And I got yanked aside by the boss.